The lesson.
Oh, yeah.
Fo, what's happening, man?
How much, mate?
Thanks very much for rolling through.
Pleasure.
For the audience who may not, necessarily be familiar with what you're all about, you're a graffiti writer, and you've been doing your thing since the 80s here in Adelaide. Is that correct?
Yeah. I'm semi-retired though.
So tell us a little bit, I guess, about when graffiti first grabbed you, and your memories of being young, how you got into graffiti, and then what led you into actually becoming involved in the whole thing.
Yeah, I started writing in '85. I think I was about 13 in year 9 in high school. I remember my high school as being year 8 was pretty normal, really, all just strictly academic. My father was a school teacher and actually taught at the same high school, so there was no messing around. And but by the time year 9 rolled around, and as a teenager you start getting into that rebellious sort of phase also, a bunch of guys came to the school, and I think some of them came from my ex-primary school, Linden Park, and some of them came from elsewhere. But regardless, with them came this new thing, graffiti. And look, I probably just wanted to hang out with these guys and that and just do whatever they were doing, sort of thing. I don't consciously remember sort of seeing graffiti and go, I want to be a graffiti writer. I think it was more just a peer group pressure thing, to a certain degree and that, but in a positive sort of way. I was always an angry kid and, a difficult sort of childhood and that. But yeah, I was always sort of an angry kid, but also an artistic one. So when you throw those two together, graffiti just ticks all the boxes, man. And so these guys rolled up in year 9, ended up being sort of friends with them. They were in the year below me because, by that time I was in year 9, they were year 8. So this is ABSK, Cage, and a bunch of other breakers as well. Mark Anderson, Nigel Tinning and this sort of thing, and this was at the same time when breaking sort of took off in Adelaide as well. So it was a new happening sort of thing, and I wanted to be involved whatever they were doing on that. And I was pretty whack, and they treated me like shit and that really for the first couple of years and that. And but it's a motivational sort of thing and that, and I wanted to go out of my way to sort of prove to myself and prove to these guys that I was all right at what I was doing and that. But yeah, the first couple of years were pretty lame and stuff. So yeah, I got into graph by '85. These guys were in it by '84. And I think they let me come along and do a piece of them. One of them in '85 and one of them in '86 as well. And in the meantime, I was just doing these whack tags everywhere and all this sort of thing and that. And that wasn't really sort of till about '87, I suppose, when I sort of came into my own. And then it just went on from there basically.
And then so from '87, is that I imagine that's sort of where you started to get a bit deeper into it?
Yeah, I was pretty hooked by late '87. I mean, I was pretty hooked in '85 as well. You had to imagine, every man and his dog back then had a tag. Breaking was really popular. Everyone loved it, and then with that sort of came graffiti. I mean, graffiti sort of internationally in the Western world, it sort of stems from breakdance as well, so probably the breaking came first and foremost from our point of view, and then with it came graffiti, with it came hip-hop. And so if you're into one, you're into all, sort of to a certain degree. And I remember actually, when I got into graph, I was sort of more interested in breaking to start with, but I was hopeless at doing any sort of breaking. I could throw a backspin, that was about it though. Pretty uncoordinated with all that sort of thing, but I wanted to be involved with what was going on anyway. So I was more attuned to the art side of things and got into it a bit deeper like that. And by '87 it sort of started getting a bit serious in that. Late '87 we went to our first train yards and things like that. I think that's pretty serious.
And so what was the first tag that you had?
Oh wow. Tags back in those days were very breaking orientated. So they weren't they were pretty sort of weird and wonderful. You had to understand that with breaking, there's no Googling anything or anything like that. your initiation into breaking and into graffiti and all that sort of thing is through any sort of book you can get your hand on that might be in the library or whatever and that. And it was generally something like, you know, a how-to breakdance book or something or other, or a how to breakdance video that might be available at the local bookstore, any of this sort of thing. There weren't any designated publications by that stage. There were no books, there were no graph mags, there were no graph shops, no websites, there's no internet, there are no mobile phones. It's all word of mouth and all this sort of thing. It's looking at record covers that come in, and most of them are pretty bloody cheesy. A lot of them, you know, this is an American thing in that, you know, where, okay, there was some great guys writing by the, you know, the late 60s or whatever, early 70s in New York, and we all know that now, but we didn't know that back then. But then the American thing was making money on graffiti and making money on breaking and making money on anything like this, whether it's skateboarding or whatever the new sort of craze or fad or whatever you want to call it may be. And graffiti and breaking and all that sort of thing was no different. So, you know, LA gets hold of these sorts of things and you start seeing movies like Beat Street, you start seeing movies like Breakdance. And with that, I mean, if anyone's seen Breakdance and Breakdance 2, Electric Boogaloo and all this sort of thing, they're cheesy as hell, man. You got people wearing bloody bandanas around their legs and weird and wonderful clothes and all that sort of thing. Anyone walk down the street wearing that shit these days would get thumped. It's not cool. But back then, no one really knew any different, you know. And there were some people that dressed like that, but they had some pretty weird names. And I can't think off the top of my head what the names were in Breakdance, to be honest, but they were pretty wacky. They weren't cool, tough names, you know what I mean? So, you know, and so the breakers had some pretty strange names. One of the early sort of tags I remember was Shoke, S-H-O-K-E. I mean, that means nothing to anyone. I don't even know what that means. Are you just playing around with different names and all that sort of stuff, you know? I wrote Fuse for a little while, which by this, you know, today's standard probably sounds a bit cool and that, but then I think I remember finding out that someone else wrote it. And you learn pretty early on that you don't buy other people and originality is the key to it all. So then I changed it to Confuse. I think I was only really confusing myself, man, because who wants to, what, you know, a 7-letter tag or whatever, you know? It's outrageous. That takes a lot of time to write. I wrote Sign, I think, for a little while, S-I-N-E. I wrote my own name for a little while. I mean, you're just really trying to find yourself. It wasn't until years later and that, to be honest, and that then I sort of went to Melbourne and was influenced by what was going on with there at the time. And this was late 87, I believe. That I sort of came back with a thought to get into it pretty damn seriously and that. And I thought, well, you know, I've got to have to come up with a cool name. And I wanted something that was tough in that, you know, like something that was, you know, it was cool, man. You know, like, I don't know, like death or, you know, something sort of crime or, you know.
With a bit of edge to it.
Yeah, some sort of edge or something or other. So I just started flicking through the dictionary and just picking letters that I wanted to start with or whatever and that. And I think I probably just started from the beginning actually. And I got to F and I found Foe, F-O-E. And I thought, no, I don't want to spell it that way. And probably influenced by Phase 2 with the PH sort of thing going on there. I thought I'll change it and that. So I whacked a PH in front of it. And so I played around with that and then started off with that. And then kept that. And I have various names over the years since then. But yeah, I was just always sort of stuck with that one. Foe does not mean noodle, and this is before the Vietnamese people were here and all this sort of thing and that. Foe means enemy, and that's sort of the angle I was going with, all right? It's got nothing to do with bloody noodles.
The lesson. 927. Oh, yeah.